A podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans. This week, we are joined with another great guest, Artem Koren. Welcome to the show, Artem.
Thank you. Exciting to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. So let me briefly introduce you, and then we'll have you tell us a little bit more about yourself. But Artem is the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Sembly.ai, which is a SaaS platform that uses AI algorithms to transcribe and analyze meetings. And Artem has 16 plus years of product management experience and applied AI learning to his work since 2009, and is passionate about using AI to enrich humanity and create positive change. So I'm really excited to talk about what you're doing right now, some of your experience, and more. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I'm from New York originally, Columbia grad and NYU grad, so very, very much a New Yorker. I started off my career in technology. So I was in IT and IT management for a number of years. Then I transitioned into management consulting, during which time I also did some product management. And I've kind of veered between management consulting and product for a number of years, until 2019, where I got together with my co-founder, Gil McClef, and we thought about our experience in management consulting and how technology has been facilitating meetings in the workspace, but not really understanding what they're about, the content of them. And we had a simple idea at the time, which was how valuable would it be for an AI to be a fly on the wall in a meeting, hear what was being said, understand it, and then do something useful about it after the meeting. And that's where the idea for Sembly.ai was born.
I think that's great. And I'm really excited to talk about it because I think that this is a really exciting use of AI and use of technology in general, in an area that really, really needs it. And so I'm excited to talk more about it. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit more about anything that you like to do outside of the office or outside of the general workday?
Well, that's a tough one. At the risk of sounding extremely nerdy, which this is going to be, but it is what it is. One of my hobbies is chess, and I recently moved to Amsterdam last summer, and I've gotten into this meetup called Beer and Chess, or is it Chess and Beer? But those are the two key ingredients. So that's some of what I do after work, on some of my weekends. And then another thing, this is going to be nerd central, but just right away I'm telling you, I was always curious about Dungeons and Dragons. Do you know about this? Have you ever?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So always curious, never tried it. I think Elon Musk actually has it in his biography that he used to be a dungeon master. I'm like, well, if Elon did it. So I found an English-speaking Dungeons and Dragons meetup in Amsterdam. So I've been doing that a little bit. Honestly, really love it. It's kind of amazing. Other than that, I'd like to travel around the country, just taking a look at some of the cities around Netherlands that I haven't seen. And the reality is, though, that I don't have very much time beyond work. It's just the nature of being a co-founder. It's a little bit all-encompassing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those sound like some really, really interesting and cool, but like you said, kind of geeky hobbies. We've actually been into kind of see over the shoulder there into chess. My son has been very much into chess this past year. And so we've been doing chess and chess club, and just finished a chess tournament a couple weekends ago that he was part of. So
Nice.
we're very much enjoying that as well. So it's just a fun game. So like that a lot. There have a lot to dive into and want to jump into some of the things that you touched on as you were kind of introducing yourself. But why don't we start with just diving in a little bit more about your journey? So you mentioned that you were in New York, you've done some management consulting, some product management, and then saw this problem with meetings and potential solution with applying technology and AI to listening and helping with that. But why don't you dive in a little bit more into your journey? What brought you to your current role, co-founding Sembly.ai, this company, and what has that journey been like?
I was always interested in what's around the corner. I like to think about the next thing. And it's kind of interesting because I've never been a latest gadget person. I never had the latest PlayStation or anything like that. But I was always interested in thinking about innovation and what's coming from the future. Something like, so for instance, at Ernst & Young, there's this concept of the art of the possible. And my mind always gravitated to be just a little bit more in the future. And I was always excited about artificial intelligence. I took some courses on AI back at Columbia University. And when I took those courses, I was actually very disappointed because I came in expecting to learn about AI, but instead I learned about these deep tree search algorithms, which is really a really fast way to try every possible option and then find maybe one that works. And that's not AI. That's not how humans think. That's not how people think. You're not sitting there thinking through every combination and canceling out the ones they don't like. And I knew immediately that wasn't AI. And I thought, okay, I guess we're still pretty far away from AI. And then about 6 or 7 years later, I randomly ran across a friend on the NYU campus. I was doing the Stern MBA at the time. And this was a person I knew from back in high school. And he was working at Jan LeCun's lab. Now, by the way, now everyone knows who Jan LeCun. Well, Jan LeCun leads AI for Meta, and he's considered one of the founding fathers of modern machine learning, famous for his research and progress in convolutional neural nets, which was one of the initial very successful machine learning approaches to identifying images, or cats in images, let's say, or handwriting. And so Jan LeCun had a lab at NYU. I'm not sure if he still does, but at that time. And so I talked to this person that I've known before. His name is Yuri. And he told me about some of the work they're doing there. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And so I actually made like a coffee lunch with another student at that lab who on his computer showed me by hand in Python a convolutional neural net that he created. So this is before TensorFlow, PyTorch, these platforms for developing machine learning. This is years before they were available. He coded all of these just based on matrix math, which is what the founding underpinnings of this is. And he showed me how you can recognize like handwritten digits using this neural net. And that to me was like, okay, we now have a seed of what I think is really going to be AI eventually. At the time, I kicked off a startup that tried to use CNNs for trying to identify cancers in biopsies. So you had biopsy images and you try to do AI-based cancer detection. Failed gloriously for many reasons. It was way too early. The data wasn't there. The technology wasn't there yet. The images were like multiple gigabytes, and that was hard for computers at the time. A lot of stuff, but a little bit too early, I think, for what we were trying to do. But when I returned to the space years later, now there was the TensorFlows, the PyTorches, the processes for how to properly attack ML type problems and organize data sets and manage them, that I was really, really inspired by what was possible next. And I could see it. I can see it so much that I could touch it. I could touch the fact that there's an AI in your meeting, understands everything you're saying, and can do something useful after that meeting as a result. To me, that was something that was more real than not at that point, even though I think for the rest of the world, it was still a faraway idea. And that's really what brought me to Sembly.ai. I could smell the reality of it. And I could tell you that there was this seminal moment in our first year. So we founded in 2019. In the first year, the very initial team, very junior team, as we were trying to attack a few problems in this area, build a prototype. There was a moment where we took a summarization model, and I gave it a CNN article and essentially asked it to tell me, okay, what is this article about? And it said that this is about the fact that Ford is about to come out with a Mustang that's a truck. And it was absolutely correct. And I fell back into that was the first time I saw true reading comprehension from a machine learning model. And to me, that, it was a very, very early experiment in something that I knew was coming. It was a very early experiment that indicated, okay, in the next few years, this is going to be a monster. The rest is history. And now we have, GPT-4 and ChatGPT around.
It feels very much, and as you talk about it, you can see and hear the evolution and almost the rapid evolution of, how this has taken shape. How have you felt like that evolution really has occurred? Because, I think for a lot of us that AI has been this topic of discussion, or it's been there. It's kind of been this, for me anyway, kind of this slow burning thing that's been going on. And we've been using, kind of like you said, some of the machine learning and some of this very more rudimentary applications of it for some time. And then there's just been this rapid pace of innovation and rapid pace of development that has happened more recently. What's your kind of view of the space and the development? Has that been the case, or being more involved in some of these areas? Like, what has been your experience with some of the development of the technology and some of the things happening there?
I think there's at least two, probably more, parallel evolutions in this space. And the two I'll point to are terminology, and the other one is technology. When we talk about what AI is, 20 years ago, when I was studying those rudimentary AI, quote unquote AI approaches, I never thought that was AI. I never thought that deep tree search is AI. I never thought that. That never made sense to me. I thought I was violently against. But my computer science professors teaching the AI course thought this was AI. And so there's a terminology question, because they thought that was AI. Then, 10, 15 years later, the convolutional neural nets and lots of data, that was AI. And now we're 2023, where you can ask ChatGPT to create a walking tour that's 3 hours long in the city that starts at this point, that hits one of these landmarks towards the end of the tour. And it does a perfect job of that. And that's also AI, right? So this terminology has evolved a great deal as far as what we think AI is. I think now, looking back, we can probably start to say, well, maybe that deep tree search is not an AI. That's just a way to fake intelligence that sometimes does a good job. And actually, there's been very clever ways of faking intelligence. For example, in Deep Blue and how it played chess, right? There's ways to do deep searches that give you really good results if you throw enough compute at it. That's fine, but it's a very narrow problem-solving system. The AI of today is much more broadly capable. It's interactive in a very human way. It understands multiple languages. It understands actual audio speech really well, the core for our product. So what AI means in terminology, I think, has evolved, where maybe it's converging into this more of a sci-fi meaning that's usually baked into books. Like when sci-fi talks about AI or like Star Trek, I think we're now converging towards that point. Whereas in 20 years ago, if someone was not technically familiar with AI, they would think that it's more like sci-fi, where somebody was very familiar with AI, they're like, no, this is just bits and algorithms. So the terminology is one. The technology evolution has been really interesting, and I think what's really unique about it is the speed. So the concept for modern approaches to machine learning were documented back in the 60s and the 70s. And then there was a long pause because there was a paper that effectively said that, okay, this is theoretically not possible to do. And all the scientists were like, okay, I guess this is not possible. Then a few revolutionary, like a few contrarian scientists, like Jan LeCun was one in the 90s, said, well, maybe this really can work, and then tried it and started doing things with it. So the concept for modern AI machine learning began all the way in the mid late 1900s, paused, came back, and then we had this phase, I'd say, from around, let's say, 2008 or 10 to maybe a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, that I've been calling the classical machine learning phase. So this is a phase where AI was about you feed it a lot of data to solve a very particular problem. So your problem is, let's say, is there a cat in the picture? Is there not a cat in the picture? And so you can amass this huge data set of cat, not cat, give the neural net all of the examples, and after a long enough training session, it can start to predict fairly well on its own whether the picture has a cat or doesn't. Okay, so that's what I would call classical machine learning. And that was very actual in how you do AI, until a few years ago. In the last few years, there's been this new architecture, which is transformer. It's called a transformer. And the crux of that approach to machine learning is that all it does is tries to predict the next word in a sequence. That's all it does. But it turns out that's an extremely powerful tool if you can craft it in the right way. And so with transformers, and now large language models are based on this transformer architecture, rather than feeding it a lot of data to solve a particular problem, like is there a cat in the picture, with these, you feed it all of the data. So you're not giving it cat, not cat. You're giving it literally the Encyclopedia Britannica, or the Wikipedia, I guess, for the more modern. And now it's starting to be able to discern conceptual patterns in the data. And it's able to be it's able to understand language. It's able to understand a wide range of concepts. And it's able to provide intelligent responses in a very broad range of topics. So it's no longer cat nor cat. It's like, can you create a walking tour? Can you tell me like a certain fact, and so on and so That's the modern invocation of AI. It's broad, it's generalized, it's interactive in a very human language way. You can misspell things. It will understand everything you're saying. It's weird that it works, but it truly works. Of course, it comes with its own downsides. There's certain weaknesses in this technology. So things like it can hallucinate things. It can lie about things. It can give you, like, it can know that something it's saying is actually false and still say it. There's copyright issues. There's guardrail issues. Like it can talk about destructive things. It can talk about illegal things. And it's actually hard to get it not to. Bing has learned that the hard way. So it's not yet this it's not yet the holy grail, but it's the closest thing we've had to a holy grail in AI ever. And the classic machine learning development took maybe 10 years. And this thing, came out, the GPT and other large, powerful large language models. That evolution happened in the last, 3 to 5. It's mind-boggling, the pace of progress and how it's accelerating constantly. It's really amazing.
It definitely feels that way. And, there's obviously been a lot that has gone into it, and the pace of acceleration seems like it continually has been increasing. And we just see so much more happening in the space, and the potential there is just so incredible. And I want to touch a little more on that. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about Sembly.ai and kind of the application of this and what you've been working on. You kind of touched on that, bringing a lot of this technology and some of the solutions that we're seeing into meetings and solving some of these problems. So tell us a little bit more about Sembly.ai. Again, you kind of touched on the idea and the problem that you were addressing, but tell us more about that and some of the things that you've been working on in taking all of this technology and applying it to kind of this specific space.
Sure. Love to talk about Sembly. I'm very, very proud of the product that we're able to put together with the team. The concept is consistent from day one, which is, what could you do if you had an AI participant in your meeting? How the product works is there's no like downloads, there's no like complicated installs, there's none of that. You register like you would on any other website or mobile app, and we can sync with your calendar. So Sembly can connect to your Outlook or Google Calendar. They can see all the meetings you have coming up. And you can configure it to either attend all the meetings in calendar, only the ones you create, or just the ones that you indicate you want Sembly to attend. And on the next meeting, when you go to it, meet with your team or your client or whoever you're meeting with, the Sembly teammate will show up. It will be just another participant on that call. It will say hi. It will say we're recording, and that's it. It's going to hang out and listen. At the end of that meeting, when you go to Sembly, you're going to have a full transcript of the conversation. You have the meeting notes that AI generates. You have key takeaways, things like actions, issues, risks, decisions, and so on. Many useful identified items. And beyond that, you have Semblian, which is a chat interface that you can ask anything about the meeting, or you can say, okay, write me a follow-on email with the next steps based on this meeting. And in a few seconds, you're going to have a perfect email with all the details that were discussed in the meeting that are important to surface for the next meeting. So that's the basic flow of Sembly. And then you can get into more interesting things. So for instance, because it's an AI attendee, and it's exactly what it is. It's not a manner of speaking. It's literally an AI comes to your meeting and listens in. So because of that, you don't have to be at the meeting. You can ask Sembly to join a meeting that you can't make. You can include a little message to the team, say, "Hey, sorry, dentist, please, talk about this point that we were going to talk about." That's it. Sembly will be there for you. Listen in, come back with the meeting notes. When you're ready, you can either open the mobile app or the web app, and in a few seconds, be up to speed on what happened in the meeting. Even more so, you can open your Sembly and chat, and you can say, "Were there any specific items that I should pay attention to from this meeting that were specifically for Artem?" And it will give you the list. It's crazy good. It's really, really creepily good. And it's very nuanced in the way that it understands these things. So those are some of the more interesting cases. And then, of course, there's things like my commitment. So Sembly tracks your to-do. So you're talking in the meeting, you say, "Okay, I'm going to send you this next week." And then if you're anything like me, you have 10 meetings a day, more meetings a day, every day. And you have your weekend with your awesome Dungeons and Dragons friends. And then you come back to work on Monday and you scratch your head. You're like, "Okay, what were the 174 things I said I was going to do?" Sembly tracks your to-dos. You just open your to-do app that you've connected to Sembly, and you'll have a list of all your activities there. So that's just another benefit out of Sembly coming to your meeting. So those are some of the core capabilities of the Sembly product. And if you think about it, it's like, well, if I had AI come to my meetings, remember all the meetings. Obviously, they're searchable. Obviously, they're shareable. Obviously, they're reviewable in any language. Let's say your team likes to talk in French, but you're not a French speaker. Maybe there's a global team that, is a marketing team in France, but you're in the United States. They had a meeting, but you'd like to understand what the messaging is for a certain product that's coming out in France. You can ask Sembly to talk to you about the meeting in English, and take this French meeting, summarize it in 5 lines in English. All those things are possible. So it almost is limited to your imagination of how much you'd like it to do for you, aside from the things that it does out of the box, like meeting notes, meeting recall, the to-do items and things like that. It's almost unlimited how much it can do and automate for you after the meeting.
That's you've touched on some really, really incredible things, because I know for me, as I go through more and more meetings, I run into the same problem and I'm a person who I'm like taking notes. Like I have my iPad and I'm taking handwritten notes because that's what I do. And I'll have like the things, the to-do items, but then again, it's all just like in my notes and things like that. And, the to-do list and all of those things. And like, what was talked about, all of that, just, it gets, kind of siloed or pushed away. And then, there'll be like the one to-do item that maybe slips my mind or slips somebody else's mind and all of that. And so like being able to have that like continually surfaced or just like searchable of, here's the meetings, here's all of the to-do lists. And if I just want to go back to a meeting and be like, what did we talk about? Because I've been in 10 meetings and I can't remember anymore. And I just need to know, like, that alone is just a super fascinating thing to me. And I kind of want to touch more on meetings and where you see this going. But before we do that, what have you learned or what have you seen as people are applying this to meetings? Has there been anything that you've seen that's interesting or maybe even surprised you as people have started to use this and put it into practice in their meetings or in their searches or in their to-do list or commitments or anything like that?
So there's some macro effects of using a VoiceAI platform on a team or in an organization. For instance, meetings can get shorter and you can get fewer participants in a meeting because very often you want to get the update, you want to get the knowledge share, but you're not a decision maker, or you don't have an input into this decision that's being discussed. But there's a bit of FOMO, like, okay, if I'm not there, like, am I going to miss something important? So those participants now can focus on doing productive work, achieving high value outcomes. And after the meeting, they just go to Sembly and they either look at the meeting notes that AI generates, or they just ask a specific question about a specific topic that they're interested in that was discussed. So that opens up a lot of productive time. And it shortens meeting time because now fewer people are in there, so you can have quicker conversation. You can get more things done quickly. In fact, the slogan that we go with is attend less, accomplish more, because meetings have grown tremendously since COVID-19. Everybody's on online meetings all the time, but the productivity isn't necessarily keeping up, because just because you had twice as many meetings doesn't mean you get twice as much done. It's probably the inverse is true. Yeah. And we shouldn't forget that there are humans attending these meetings, and people need time to think deeply about things and be creative on their own. And not all great things happen in a meeting. I can tell you for me, if there's certain complex ideas that I need to process, I need alone time. So the ability to carve more alone time for me is critical, even though my life revolves around meetings to meetings to meetings. And so, one way that this has changed people in organization is it gave people back some time and opened up their calendar a little bit, allowed them to work a little bit more asynchronously, which is, one of the future of work concepts that we play into very directly. So that's one. Another would be that we have a customer who's been with us for a while. It's a large organization. And they think of Sembly as more of a team member rather than a software. And this is so new, and it always tickles me to talk about this because I think we'll hear a lot more of these kinds of paradigms in technology in the coming decade, but we've never heard of this in the past decade. But this customer thinks of Sembly as a teammate. And as a result, the kind of conversations we have with this customer are about, we're working, we've learned that, Sembly is, it thinks about things in this way. And so it will give us these kinds of items in this way. And so it's almost like getting to know a team member. Like it has certain, preferences and certain ways it thinks about things and certain things it likes to highlight, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's an interesting shift in how you go about your work and have your meetings when you're assuming there's this team member with you. And I guess on the other hand, so these are teams who are using Sembly and using it to be more productive. But then there's like the other side of the sword. Like I can tell you that when I'm in a meeting without Sembly, there's like a little bit of real anxiety that creeps in. It's weird, right? Because initially, for a lot of customers, it's a little jarring. Like, okay, why are they listening? Like, who's going to hear this? Like, why is this being recorded? Eventually, you get through that, and you get very, very comfortable with an AI on your call. It's just part of the course, like it's normal. And then there's the third phase of when you start to get a little worried when AI is not on your call, because you've learned to rely, like I have. I've gotten used to the fact that I always have searchable transcripts. I always have something I can share with a team member. If I had a call with a customer and I got some good feedback items, what I do, this is what I did today. I go click, share a link to something the client said with one of my product managers and say, hey, look at this. This is important feedback. that's something that I'm so used to now that if I don't have it and the client says something important, all I'm thinking, instead of being like, okay, I need to write, all I'm thinking is, I really wish I had Sembly on this call right now. So there's kind of like the other end of how it changes you, where you now get so used to it that you miss it when it's not there.
Absolutely. You've touched on a couple of things that I want to kind of pull on a little bit, but the future of meetings, I think is so intriguing because you talked about there, being able to shorten meetings and have fewer people and really make them more efficient. And I think that's so important because meetings have gotten or have the potential to kind of get out of hand and have that FOMO like you talked about, and really being able to take a lot of that away because it's not, people don't necessarily have to miss out because you can have these recordings and searchable parts of it, and people can be a part without necessarily having to take time. How do you see that going forward with both Sembly and just in general, as far as the future of meetings and the future of applying AI and technology to the way that we meet?
I think one thing that's that's already happening, but it's going to become pervasive, is all meetings will have some form of AI participation. All meetings, because there's a value multiplier there, and then why wouldn't you multiply the value of the time you've spent? That's kind of crazy not to. So that's the first thing that's going to happen, and that's already the case for our meetings. Many of the clients we talk to already either use us or can use one of our competitors as well. But we're starting to see this being a normal thing. And as we go forward, I think what you're going to see in these meetings is that the AI will start to be more useful during the meeting as well. So right now, for example, we're very focused on value, productivity, and value after the meeting. So we automate some activities for you. We kind of take the pain out of the follow-on, which is so important, right? Because the follow-on is where the results come from. But as we go forward, I think you're going to start to see AI become more independent and self kind of propelling in certain ways, both during and after the meeting. And so you're going to have some interactions with AI where maybe it's an AI teammate from another team that joined your meeting because that team needs a status update on a certain thing because they have a dependency on your thing. So you might have an agent or a participant from this other team join in and specifically look for certain information. And then where I tend to really freak people out is this next one. So the AI participating and actually kind of voicing specific things, I think we're, within a couple of years of that, not so far, like literally a couple of years. But I think within like maybe 5 to 7 years-ish, you might have a meeting where there's a AI from one team who meets with an AI from another team. Now that's really fun. And I think people get really nervous about this idea because it's such a mind melt, but it's all heading in that direction, where, I have an AI agent or participant on my side. Maybe my client does, and maybe, my Sembly knows some information we need, knows how to get in touch with the client's Sembly. They have a little chat, and my Sembly comes back to me with the information. Very realistic. It's so useful that I don't see why that wouldn't happen. So that's in terms of AI participating in meetings and how that will change. Meeting themselves, I think the trend is much more flexible, much more asynchronous, being able to much more focused maybe. And really, ironically, I think actually becoming more human, because there's an important human element, like that's true on our team. Like we don't, when we go into a meeting, it's always first about something that's going on in our lives. Very, very rarely do we jump into the deep with the technical and whatnot. Only when we're very pressed on certain times or something like that. The normal thing is it's about the person to person interaction. Like, I really care about what's going on in my teammates' lives and my team leads' lives. I want to know, I want to understand. And now that we're so remote, that part of interaction is that much more important, because I never get to see them in person, like once or twice a year now. A big part of our team is in Ukraine. They've been very impacted by the war. I lived in Ukraine for a couple of years, so I know that situation well. And that human bit of interaction is becoming more important. And I think we can get more human knowing that the key elements required for follow-on after the meeting are well captured and well addressed with the AI that was hanging out with us during the call. So it actually allows me to be maybe a little bit more plugged in, a little bit more focused on the conversation, rather than worry about, okay, like, I need to jot this down, like this will need to go to this, like, Julie needs to be updated about that. Like, I don't need to do that. I can focus on the person I'm talking to. And maybe that's an interesting side benefit of AI participating along with us.
I think you're absolutely right. Making meetings more focused and ultimately more human. It's an interesting juxtaposition of the technology and AI being able to help focus more on people ultimately. And I think you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you touched on the active participation and the AI almost being able to start to do some of these things at some point, because that was where I wanted to take this as well. Where you see that coming down the road, where you have either teams or different groups being able to have an AI, getting updates or asking for updates, and being able to have these interactions almost independently, and being able to either asynchronously or within meetings have those types of interactions, and even start to minimize some of the in-person meetings that we need to have when those can be handled without people necessarily being involved all the time, which I think is a fascinating route. And you mentioned that the reaction of that has been kind of mixed. Do you see people being excited about that, or is there some hesitation about that, or has it been kind of a mixed bag?
I would say today the reaction is broadly creeped out. That's the dominant reaction. People are creeped out by the idea. I'm not. I think it's cool, but I also, not only do I think it's cool, I think it's inevitable. I think a lot of the things that are happening now in the AI space are inevitable. And because this is so useful, anything that's useful is inevitable in a way. Assuming obviously, no major downside risk. And that's something, that's a big topic of discussion today, broadly about AI. So there's been news that, for example, Italy banned ChatGPT and Germany's talking about it. But that's kind of but ultimately this is what modern AI is a method. It's a way to take a lot of data and make an intelligent model out of that data. It's a method. It's not an object. It's a way to do things. It's almost like, there's a way to think scientifically about things, or there's a way to solve math problems. You can't ban solving math problems. Like, you can always find X, like no matter what law you put into place, 2X equals 20, you can find X. Like, you can't put a legislature around that. Modern AI is more like that. It's a way to solve formulas, just in a different context and a little bit more complicated, but it is. So because it's a method, it's going to result in this kind of progress. And so, yeah, so today the reactions are, it's creeped out. I think people, it's very natural. I get it. I understand. I've been baking in this for a number of years. So to me, it's a little less crazy. I think for many people, this is very new and very jarring. But as we go into this year, next year, everyone will start to encounter some types of AI-based solutions in their lives, probably are already. And these ideas will start to get more and more normal. And eventually, our grandkids will not understand what do you mean there wasn't an AI in your classroom, or there wasn't an AI in your professional meeting. How does that even work? I think we're headed in that direction.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to think about, and the fact that at some point, probably in the not too distant future, I will be sending an AI to not just get updates or listen in, but to probably contribute a few pieces to certain meetings. To, I guess, both give updates, get updates, and then let me know what some of the takeaways are for certain things when I may not be able to be there, or something like that, or to interact with another AI and exchange information asynchronously or to that effect. It's a fascinating thing that we're going to be seeing, probably coming up faster than we think I would expect. So
that's exactly what I wanted to say. The pace of innovation here is geometric. It's exponential. And as people, we're not wired to have a good sense of exponential changes or exponential time changes. It doesn't really compute. Like, we just don't have a good feeling for it. But it's coming faster than we think. And it opens up some very interesting considerations. So, for instance, we're already there in a way. So I mentioned we have this feature where an AI tracks your to-dos. So isn't that very, very close to an AI telling you what to do, right? It's not exactly that yet, because we're working off of things you said. So we have like a CYA, right? Like we have it's not our idea. This was your idea. We're just showing it to you. That's how the feature works today, and very intentionally so, because we don't want to say, we're making things up for you to do, or also we don't even want to say that this is something you have to do. So the feature in the product is called My Commitments. It's not My To-Dos, meaning that these are things you said, and we think these are things you meant you want to do. Whether you want to treat it as a to-do item or not, that's up to you. So it's a very democratic to-do tracker today. But let's say you have an enterprise that says, okay, there's certain kinds of activities we want the AI to reinforce. You can get an AI to pick tasks differently. You can get an AI to surmise tasks based on a discussion about a goal. So there was no task voiced, but the AI scratches its head and it goes, okay, you were talking about, you need to launch a product. Well, to launch a product, you're going to need to build a website. So why don't we throw in a task to build a website to the design team for the design, and then, or maybe the AI augmented design team for the design, and then it can kick off a workflow because it understands what you're trying to achieve. And at that point, it's starting to drive actual human activity towards a goal. This is not so crazy. Like, if you think about my example of, I went to Utrecht with family. We didn't have a plan, so I asked AI to come up with a plan for us for a walking tour. We're effectively doing for that day what the AI told us to do. We enjoyed it. It was within the parameters that we wanted, but effectively that was happening. A lot of people are talking about the fact that Tinder is like AI matching people, for procreation, for new generation. So it's subtle today. And I would say it's kind of like the soft hand of AI today, where AI is like, it's not me telling you. It's like, no, it's your idea, but I'm just helping you out. But the switch between that and AI starting to sprinkle in a little bit of its opinion about what it thinks is a good task for you to do, it's a half a step. We're very close. And I think it'll be very interesting when there's systems out there next year, a couple of years from now, not so far, literally a year or two, where the AI will have some good ideas about what a team member should be working on, and how do we think about that? Is that okay? Is that, those are some interesting questions.
They are, and it's a super fascinating space, and I'm excited to see where this goes and the number of things that will be coming out of it, both for meetings and generally speaking. Zooming out a little bit, I'm interested in your thoughts on, where do we see other impacts? We've talked about meetings and some of the to-dos and even some of the other things we were talking about now. But generally speaking, where do you see potentially other impacts of AI in work and life going forward?
It's probably easier to think about where there aren't, because it's a new. I like to say that modern AI, the latest generation of AI, the really smart large language models, generative AI, it's a new kind of a material that we can sprinkle all throughout our lives. In a way, it's very similar. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's very similar to the .com boom and the advent of the internet. And so, that has changed absolutely everything. It's changed what it means to be a human being in the world. It changed what it means to be a civilization, right? The internet has completely changed how we think about lives. And I think AI has the same potential for impact. I think it's a question of what happens sooner versus what happens later. But it's going to upend everything that we understand. It's going to upend everything. Every aspect of our lives is going to be touched. Interestingly, there was a lot of thought around, like, can AI be truly creative? Like, isn't that the space of humanity, like innovation, creativity? It's interesting because, my uncle brought up this point, but I think he's right on the money, where he says, what? In the science fiction books, it was always the robots doing the hard labor and, like, cleaning, like, things. And the humans were, like, kind of, smoking their pipe and philosophizing. And it could be that the opposite is true. I don't want to be a dystopian, but it's hard for AI to touch real world things. That's still a hard problem, because physicality of the real world presents certain real challenges. But if it doesn't have to touch real world things, it's actually really, really good at thinking about stuff. And so coming up with digital outcomes. And so it's already disrupting and will continue to disrupt all of our creative fields. I think what it means to be an artist of various sorts in the new world in the next decade is going to be rethought. My friend who's deep in the music business sent me a link to a group that generated an original Jay-Z track with Jay-Z vocals and Jay-Z lyrics that wasn't Jay-Z. So he's, it's game over for a lot of classic ways that we've been producing creative content, and we're looking at things that are very personalized. Like maybe my ideal music station is duet of Lil Wayne and Madonna or something. And I can get that if that's my idea of entertainment. Like, we can produce that using AI techniques. So that industry will get upended. The medical industry is going to get upended with AI, because AI is just really good. It's passing medical exams left and right. You look at GPT-4. So what it means to consult with a doctor might get disrupted. all sorts of consults and consultations, psychologists. I don't see a reason why your psychologist has to be a real human being anymore. You can talk to a psychologist you feel really comfortable talking to. You can design one, and they will give you the kind of methodology that you want and be very, very effective in it. So that's getting appended. It's hard to think of an industry that's not going to get appended in the next few years. I think the industries that are relatively safe are the industries where you have to touch physical things. I think those are kind of safe for a while. The one that's in the middle of those two is maybe like driving cars and trucks. But I think, with the latest advances in AI, we're going to start to see production quality results in that area where it's going to become normal to have AI-driven vehicles. But you can see the complexity there. There's been many companies dumping billions of dollars into that development, and still it hasn't passed that critical mass of it's a normal thing. It's still not. There's little cities here and there where there's AI driving cars, but it's still not normal. So I think the AI-driven cars are effectively like a barrier between AI doing things in the real world versus just AI is thinking about things. If you can think about it, AI is probably going to have their hand in it very, very soon, making it faster, better, cheaper, more quality, and really changing the goals for the humans that work alongside with it.
I think that is definitely a fascinating overview, and I think you're absolutely right. Artem, this has been a super, super interesting conversation. I feel like we could probably continue it on for quite some time about both what's happening right now and some of the future things. But before I do have a couple just final kind of wrap up questions, but before we get there, any final thoughts from you on anything that we talked about or didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think that this idea of AI, it's something that everyone is going to have to find out about and learn to use, and the sooner you do it, the better prepared you'll be for what's coming. So I'd like it every time I've introduced AI-based experiences to people in my close circle, it's always been eye-opening. It's always been very positive. And I would say that, there's this now is a really cool time to start to try some of these technologies, ChatGPT, Sembly, DALL-E 2 for images, or Midjourney now is beautiful. You'll start to think about things differently. You'll start to find more opportunities where there haven't been before. Like you go off to Utrecht without a plan. What do? Boom, boom, boom. You have a plan. That's not something I would have thought of, half a year ago that I can now. So I think as an idea, I would encourage everyone to like just look around and try some of these things for yourself and see what it does for you. And it will open up new modes of thinking in your job, in your personal life, in just your individual productivity, but also just give you a little bit of preview of where things are moving, and that you can start to think about, okay, how does that juggle your, position in life and kind of get you more prepared for what's coming. I think it's a good idea for all of us at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree. Well, Artem, where can people find out more about you, about what you're working on, about Sembly?
Sembly is www.sembly.ai. So Sembly. You can go on our website. There's a free trial. There's a free personal plan of our product. Check it out. Use it in a meeting, record, upload, and see what AI can do for you in your meeting conversations and discussions. For me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Artem Koren. That's ARTEMKOREN, or on Twitter as Clearly Koren.
Perfect. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well, so you can check those out. All right. We usually wrap things up with just kind of two final questions here, but and these don't have to be product or AI based, but have you read or watched or listened to anything recently that you have found interesting and would like to share?
I've listened to a lot of things recently that I really enjoyed. I thought the Sam Altman interview on Lex Fridman podcast was really insightful, and I recommend it. I think it's certainly a data point in this transformative time for us and for technology and AI. And I think his comment on the history of OpenAI and where things are going is a good a snapshot in time. So definitely really recommend that. There's a lot. I'm consuming a lot, so it's actually hard to pick any one thing. I'm like an avid podcast YouTuber. Like I walk around the city and I listen to a lot of stuff. So
yeah. Yep, absolutely. All right. That's a good one. And we'll link that one in the show notes as well. And are there any products that you have used recently that you have either enjoyed or not enjoyed that you want to call out?
Sembly. I have, let me think. So, I mean, I use a lot of ChatGPT, that's for sure. There's a product that came out that I played with very lightly. I'll tell you what it is right now. So it's a AI-driven visual studio where you can it's kind of like Mid-Journey, but with a lot more functionality around it. It's really, really cool. I'll tell you what it is. It's called Dream Studio AI. And the full URL is beta.dreamstudio.ai. And it's fascinating for me because I'm not a graphics person. So for me, it's like magical, and it's prompt-based graphic design. So you tell it what you want and it generates, and it's brilliant, and it comes up with really beautiful graphics. So I thought it's really cool. And that whole area of like generative images is like fascinating to me. There's all sorts of apps now where they can generate, like that you can give them some photos of you and they'll generate a virtual model in different settings that's realistic, for like photorealistic. Just mind blowing. And I think it's really, really cool. And talking about where AI disrupts, like, how about photo studios and Instagram and graphic design? So.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, those are definitely some that I have seen that have been super interesting as well. So definitely agree. All right. Artem, this has been, again, an amazing conversation, and appreciate all of your insights and the stories and the work that you're doing. I think this is some incredible stuff, and really excited to see where things go in the future. So again, we'll put all of those links in the show notes, and appreciate, again, all of your insight here.
Thank you, Kyle. It was great talking, really interesting subject. So maybe, we'll have one or more of these, talk some more when AI is even more advanced.
I hope so. Yeah, we will definitely have to do that. All right. And thank you everyone for listening. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.